For 30 years, we thought we knew Ötzi the Iceman, pale skin, thick hair, a local mountain hunter who was killed in a personal feud. That image shaped museums and textbooks worldwide. Then, in 2023, a DNA study compared his genome to his Copper Age neighbors and demolished nearly everything. He was darker skinned, balding, and genetically unlike anyone around him. That last detail may explain why someone put an arrow through his back. On September 19, 1991, two hikers, Erica and Helmut Simon, picked their way across the melting ice near the Teisenjoch Pass, more than 3,200 meters above sea level. What caught their attention was not a rock or a patch of earth, but the unmistakable outline of a human body, half embedded in the glacier. The figure lay face down in a shallow gully, skin stretched tight, limbs twisted in the cold. At first glance, it seemed like a tragic mountaineering accident. Someone lost to the mountains in recent years, but the reality was far older and stranger. The ice had sealed the body almost instantly, locking it in a state of preservation rarely seen outside a laboratory. Sub-zero temperatures, a lack of oxygen, and the relentless pressure of the glacier stopped decay in its tracks. Not just bone, but skin, muscle, even the contents of the stomach survived. The cold did more than preserve a corpse. It froze a moment in time. Around the body, a collection of objects lay scattered. Fur-lined goat hide leggings, a woven grass cape, a leather hat, and shoes stuffed with grass for insulation. A copper-bladed axe, a flint dagger in a wicker sheath, a composite bow with unfinished arrows, and birchwood vessels all rested within arm's reach. Each piece was untouched by rot, offering a complete inventory of a Copper Age traveler's world. Inside the stomach, the remains of a meal, ibex meat, wheat, and barley, could be traced to within 2 hours before death. A detail so precise it reads like a forensic report rather than ancient history. Every artifact, every fiber of clothing, and every trace of Ötzi's last meal survived because of a perfect storm of natural forces. The glacier became both his time capsule and his tomb, preserving details that would one day allow scientists to extract not just objects, but secrets written into his very cells. The story that took hold after Ötzi's discovery was shaped as much by the limits of early science as by the power of narrative. In 2012, the first published genome made headlines around the world. Researchers announced that Ötzi's DNA most closely matched modern Sardinians, casting him as a typical Copper Age European, an everyman of the high Alps, fair-skinned and robust, perhaps even a distant cousin to people alive today. This finding was repeated in museum placards, news articles, and documentaries. The South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology in Bolzano unveiled a life-size wax figure, sculpted with pale skin, deep-set blue eyes, and a full head of shaggy brown hair. The figure became the face of Ötzi, duplicated in exhibitions from Europe to Japan, while textbooks and children's books echoed the same story. Here was a rugged alpine hunter, a local man whose life ended in a sudden personal dispute. The early genome data lent scientific weight to this image, despite its technical shortcomings. Low-coverage sequencing contaminated by modern DNA blurred the genetic signal but still pointed to a Mediterranean connection. The result fit a tidy narrative, an ancient European not so different from his neighbors, whose death could be explained as a quarrel over territory or resources. Museums adopted this version wholesale, building dioramas, holograms, and interactive displays around the idea of a fair-skinned, thick-haired mountaineer. For 3 decades, this portrait shaped public imagination, reinforced by the authority of genetics and the drama of a prehistoric murder mystery. Few questioned the foundation beneath the story, or wondered how much of Ötzi's identity had been constructed from fragments and assumptions. The myth became self-sustaining, carried forward by repetition and the trust placed in the tools of modern science. Johannes Krause's team set out to answer a question that had haunted ancient DNA research for years. Could the story told by Ötzi's genome be trusted? The answer depended on technology as much as on the remains themselves. Earlier efforts had struggled with low coverage and contamination, but the 2023 project began with a single goal: produce a genome as clean as any modern sample. The process started with a dentine core drilled from one of Ötzi's molars, a choice made because dentine resists contamination far better than bone. Every step took place inside a strict cleanroom, with technicians in full bodysuits using UV sterilized tools and filtered air. The extracted DNA was then treated with uracil DNA glycosylase, an enzyme that strips away the chemical scars left by millennia in the ice, removing false signals that can mimic real genetic changes. To guard against even the smallest error, dual indexing adapters were attached to every DNA fragment, ensuring that genetic barcodes could not be accidentally swapped between samples. The sequencing itself ran on an Illumina NovaSeq, generating over 2 billion reads, enough to cover Ötzi's nuclear genome roughly 30 times over. This level of depth, called 30 times coverage, allowed Krause's team to distinguish authentic ancient DNA from any modern contamination with unprecedented precision. 3 independent software packages, MAP Damage, Schmutzy, and ANGSD, cross-checked the data. Each confirmed that contamination was less than 1%, far below the thresholds that had muddied earlier results. The genome passed every test for authenticity. Damage patterns matched expectations for ancient DNA, and the allele frequencies were consistent across both the dentine and a separate bone sample. For the first time, scientists could say with confidence that the genetic portrait of Ötzi was not a product of laboratory error or modern interference, but a true reflection of the man who died on the glacier over 5,000 years ago. The curtain lifts on a face few expected. For decades, museum visitors stood before a pale-skinned, blue-eyed wax figure, gazing at what they believed to be the true likeness of the Iceman. But the 2023 genome, decoded letter by letter from a sliver of ancient tooth, tells a different story. One that starts at the level of single DNA changes and ends with a complete reimagining of the man himself. The gene SLC405A2, a major driver of light skin in modern Europeans, carries the ancestral version in Ötzi. That single fact means his skin was far darker than the alpine mountaineer of popular imagination. The SLC24A5 gene, often called the skin lightning switch, does show the lighter variant, but without the SLC45A2 change, its effect is incomplete. Together, these alleles predict an olive or even brown complexion, closer to the Mediterranean than the Alps. His eyes, once painted blue for museum displays, were almost certainly brown. The HERK2 gene, specifically the RS129-13832 site, holds the G allele in both copies, a genetic signature that leaves little doubt about iris color. Hair, too, gets a revision. The EDLR gene, in the form found in Ötzi, raises the risk of balding, not just a receding hairline, but a pronounced thinning by middle age. In place of thick brown locks, the real Iceman likely had sparse, dark hair, perhaps already vanishing at his temples. Museum curators in Bolzano now face a reckoning. The old wax figure with its northern features and full mane stands as a monument to a scientific misreading. Plans are underway to update the exhibit with darker skin, brown eyes, and a balding crown. The new face is unfamiliar, even unsettling, but it is drawn directly from the ancient code sealed in the glacier. The Iceman's true appearance, once obscured by contamination and assumption, now stands revealed, a stranger in his own museum, and perhaps among his own people. Population genetics draws a sharp boundary around Ötzi's world. When his high-coverage genome was compared to those of neighboring Copper Age groups, a pattern of isolation came into focus. Nearly 90% of his ancestry traces back to Anatolian Neolithic farmers, with less than 5% from Western hunter-gatherers, and not a trace of steppe ancestry. The difference is not subtle. Contemporaries in the surrounding alpine valleys carried a much larger mix of forager and steppe genes. Principal component analysis places Ötzi as an outlier, distant from the cluster formed by his neighbors. Runs of homozygosity, measured in stretches of 2 to 5 centimorgans, point to a small endogamous community, one that married within itself for generations. The genetic data leave little doubt Ötzi belonged to a population that lived among others but did not mix, a social boundary written into his DNA. A single arrowhead buried deep beneath the left collarbone sliced through the subclavian artery and ended Ötzi's life in moments. Forensic pathologists, reading the CT scans, describe a wound so precise and catastrophic that survival was impossible. No time for defense, no chance for escape. The copper axe, gleaming and valuable, stayed untouched at his side. Lead isotope analysis ties its metal to central alpine sources, a prized object left behind by whoever fired that fatal shot. Metagenomic traces on Ötzi's gear reveal DNA from at least 2 other people, foreign alleles on the arrow shaft and axe handle, silent witnesses to a violent encounter. One pathologist said this was not a random act, and that the evidence points to a deliberate, targeted attack. The motive remains locked in the glacier, but the pattern is clear: an outsider, a lethal ambush, and a weapon never reclaimed. Today, ancient DNA does not just redraw faces. It exposes how lines between neighbor and outsider can turn lethal. As migration and difference still spark fear, Ötzi's fate warns us. What marked him as other, marked him for death. History's boundaries remain disturbingly close. What do you think?